Hey guys, we're diving into the juice of forward-facing sonar fishing in today's video. We're also giving away a free Ducket silhouette fishing rod as a thank you to you guys for helping me reach 5,000 subscribers. So, got a couple hours to do some fishing. Let's go hit Lake Guntersville and then we're gonna talk about it. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's a bass. No, it is not. Dude, that is a freaking giant crappie. Bro, what the heck? That's the biggest crappie I've ever caught in my life. If there's any crappie guys watching this right now, they're punching air, no doubt. That's a, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a crappie fisherman, but looks like a daggum big one to me. 115. I don't know. Is this a trophy? I've always heard a 2-pound crappie is pretty big. 1 pound 15 ounces, pretty much a 2-pounder. I don't know. Somebody probably in the comments like, what are you throwing that thing back for? There we go. Finally. Solid one. He's just roaming out by himself. Guys, it is cold. That was fun. He did it dang near right at the boat. Gotta be bass. Here we go. Got him. Get back in there real quick. There's a little school of them. No, bro. Dude, what? That was a big one, bro. There we go. That's a good bass. That's a good bass. There we go. Decent bass. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Just finished up some fishing on Lake Guntersville. Had a blast. Caught a lot of fish utilizing my forward-facing sonar. And in today's video, we're going to dive into pretty much all the juice, forward-facing sonar, what I've learned in the last couple years, some tips to help you. And we're primarily, you know, as far as techniques, we're primarily focusing on minnow fishing, you know, different approaches that I like, kind of a brief setup of my live scope, what I'm running, different equipment, some tips to help you guys. Also what baits, jig heads, and how to approach these fish when you're fishing more traditional forward-facing sonar techniques. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. So pretty much almost everything that we thought that we knew about bass and bass behavior before forward-facing sonar is pretty much a lie. Not all of it, but a vast majority of the stuff that we thought we knew about how these fish, you know, how they react, how they set up, it's definitely not true. And so really, I think if you want to be an efficient forward-facing sonar angler, I think you really need just a complete mental reset. You really got to put away a lot of the different approaches that we used to take to bass. Don't get caught up in history. For example, you know, if you're fishing a point last week on a net with a Ned rig and you're catching a bunch of fish and you come back today and those fish are gone, but you shine your live scope out 30, 40 feet, you know, off over here in the creek channel and you see a bunch of fish on bait, don't just keep on fishing that point. Move out to where the fish are, fish what's in front of you, you know, pay attention to everything, pay attention to nature, pay attention to your graph, everything. You know, if you see, I say nature, if you see birds hovering around an area, that's a telltale sign that there's bait. You know, go over there, see what those birds are doing. A lot of times they're going to give away where the bait's at in the lake, and then ultimately the fish are going to be on the bait. So right now my setup for forward-facing sonar is Humminbird Mega Live 2. I had Mega Live 1 for about a year and a half, and let's just face it, it was awful. You know, I was lucky to see my bait at 30 feet on a good day, maybe 40 feet. It was just awful. I had it set up on my Helix 10. Couldn't see much. The Helix doesn't have near as good of a picture as the newer graphs. So anyways, back in August, I switched to the Mega Live 2. Did a full update on all my Solix unit. That is really important. Make sure you're updated to the most recent updates if you're running a Solix or a Helix or Explorer, whatever the case may be. But anyways, I'm running it on a Solix 12, and I really love how simple the Mega Live 2 is to set up, especially with the newer update. You know, straight out of the box, if you do everything according to the instruction manual, you're gonna have a very solid picture. Now you can tweak it and stuff as you go to different lakes and, you know, messing around with different conditions in the water, you know, sunny, cloudy, muddy water. You're going to be messing around with your contrast and sensitivity and all that. But for the most part, you know, straight out of the box, setting it up according to the instruction manual, you're going to have a great picture. And one thing that's really important is your battery setup. I've swapped to lithium batteries this year, lead time lithiums, and I can just tell a huge difference in my picture. Now, I will say I've got a little bit of noise, and I think that's from my wiring. So I've talked a little bit with Nathan from C Clear Power, and you know, they have a power harness that's supposed to have like the cleanest connection points, really clean up everything and give you that clearest image on your forward facing sonar. But anyways, he recommended me getting one of those harnesses, so I'm probably going to try that out. Hopefully that'll get rid of my noise issue. And really all it is my transducers pinging off each other, my different graphs talking to each other, just creating a little bit of noise. But we're not going to go too in depth on settings. I'm going to do a whole separate video on my Mega Live 2 settings. But so here for the last couple months, you know, late fall, early winter, these fish have been really locked in on bait balls. Smith Lake, Gunnersville, Wheeler Lake, and what I've been doing is I've been targeting these fish just out in the middle of a creek channel, you know, riverbeds, nearby like deep underwater points and stuff. The contours really haven't mattered all that much. They could kind of point me in a direction, like of an area to go to, but for the most part, I've just been hopping on that Minn Kota Ultrex and just trolling away. I'll troll for miles at a time. I mean, like, it took me, the other day I trolled for about 5 hours and finally found them in like the last hour or two of fishing and started catching them. So that's the only downside of this. It takes a lot of time to find them. You know, most of the time I just drop the trolling motor and pan around with my scope, or I'll idle around, use my side scan and 2D to find these bait balls. But when you find these fish, every day is different about how they want the bait presented. So a lot of times, you know, especially if the water's clear, they're gonna come up further in the water column to chase a bait. If the water's a little bit colder, like it's cooling off right now, so most of the time when people think about cold fronts, they just get absolutely terrified. Now, keep in mind, this is the fall time, so cold fronts in the fall time and the winter are going to be, or early winter, are going to be a lot different than cold fronts in the late winter and the early spring. These cold fronts this time of year are going to have a lot better impact on the fish as opposed to like springtime cold fronts. Those springtime cold fronts really knock those fish, you know, they knock them back, make them a little bit lazy, not as aggressive. But this time of year, I think it really actually ignites the bite until that water temp gets down into like the 40s and stuff, and then you can start seeing, you know, a more negative impact, at least from my experience of it. So right now, these cold fronts aren't really going to matter. The one thing that I've seen is it makes the bait suck down closer to the bottom, and so ultimately the bass are going to be a little bit deeper, but they generally stay a couple feet either below the bait or above the bait. For the most part, they're going to be above the bait, at least these fish that I've been catching a lot. So really the name of the game with forward facing sonar is cast at as many fish as possible. Now, sometimes, you know, you can look at a fish on your graph and be like, there's no way that's a bass. And then other times you're like, okay, well they're positioned kind of like bass, but they look really big. Go ahead and cast on them. You're not hurting anything, you know, especially if you hit them right in the head. They don't bite, okay, go ahead and move to the next fish. Now, some fish, if they show some curiosity, if they kind of turn, especially if they start following the bait up or actually bite the bait, make sure you lock onto that fish and you make multiple casts, change colors, change sizes, jig head, you know, do everything that you can to make that fish bite. But really, when I first started fishing with forward facing sonar, time management was my biggest thing. So if a fish doesn't show any interest in your bait, don't sit there and try to force it, because that fish is not going to bite, more than likely. But if that fish shows curiosity, by all means, spin, you know, make 10 casts on it, you know, before you give up. Try everything to make that fish bite, because it showed that it's feeding. It showed that it's curious, and that it will chase your bait. So a lot of times, you know, I have to pitch my minnow in there and let it fall. Like if the fish is right here, I'll let the bait fall directly on its head and just kind of give it a pop up. And a lot of times it'll let me know if that fish is aggressive or not, if it's going to bite. Because if I pop that bait up and that fish starts to follow it, then that shows that it's curious. Now, bass are pretty much naturally curious, I would say. So a lot of times you'll have some fish just ease up on it and show a little bit of interest, but you know, they're not like super aggressive. Now, if you see that fish racing up to the bait, you know, just go ahead and start reeling it up and keep that bait away from the fish. But of course, don't take the bait away, you know, all the way up to the surface, you know, instantly. You got to kind of cat and mouse, just lead him. If he's going real fast, just kind of speed up your retrieve a little bit, and most of the time the fish is going to crush it unless it gets too close to the boat. But even saying that, I've caught a lot of fish right at the boat. But as far as when your fish are going to follow the bait, when they're going to be aggressive, you know, there's a lot of different variables to that. Water temp, water clarity. You know, if that water's really cold, the fish are more than likely not going to be as aggressive. And then if the water's muddy, they're not going to come up as far in the water column to chase your bait. You're going to have to get it closer to the head. But like if you're on Smith Lake, a deep blueback herring lake, those fish are going to chase that for a long way. But as far as the biggest tip when you're fishing a minnow, if you have a fish following your bait, never let that bait fall down. If you do, I've seen pretty much 99% of the time, if you let your bait fall down, if a fish is following it and you let it fall down, that fish is going to go down and give up. I don't know exactly why that is. I guess it just looks unnatural. You know, the reason they're following it is because it looks like a bait fish fleeing. And so, you know, they're aggressive creatures. They're predators. They're going to chase that bait. So if you ever let that bait fall down, chances of you catching that fish go way down significantly. But as far as my baits, I like to keep it simple. I'm just going to talk about 3 right now because these are the 3 that I've been catching the most fish on. And one of my go-tos is the Beast Coast Seduce minnow. This is a 5 1/4 inch bait. I really like the natural shad color and the Tennessee shad color. And for the most part, 3/16 jig head, that's what I'm going to be throwing with this bait, and that's a Decoy VJ30, just a traditional ball head. It's not even tungsten, I don't think, but it has a really good presence, a really good you know, jig in action, shows up good on forward facing sonar for it to not be tungsten, and just a really stout hook. And what's important with all these baits, all these jig heads, whenever you're fishing a minnow, is to have that that upward line tie on the jig head. But that one, and then I really have been catching a lot of fish on the Berkeley Max Scent flat nose jerk shad. This is a blue-black hologram, I believe they call it. And I also fished this one on the 3/16 Decoy VJ30 jig head. And then if I go to Smith, you know, this is the 5-inch version. If I go to Smith Lake, or, you know, I'm chasing some smaller fish that are locked in on smaller bait fish like threadfin shad and all that, I swapped to the 4-inch version, and I actually changed jig heads. I just really like this rolling action on the 4-inch. This is the Owner range roller jig head, and it's also got that line tie up top, but the jig head's designed to disperse a little bit of water and cause that bait to roll, and it just gives it a little bit different action. And this minnow is really thin, like it's a thin profile bait, so that's going to allow it to rock a lot more. So that range roller is just a really good jig head. And then one that I really like too is the Duckett Sway minnow. This is the silver shad color. This one's my favorite. I like the gizzard shad color too, especially, you know, when I go to Smith Lake in the winter time and stuff. But what's cool about this jig head is this is a sway head actually made by Duckett. This whole system's made to pair with each other, the sway minnow and the sway head. But a lot of times I'll actually swap the sway minnow and put it on a range roller or the Decoy VJ30. But what's cool about this bait is that the jig head's got that similar design to the range roller, except, you know, it's obviously different. But the purpose behind this was to get the rolling action of the bait. And it does a very good job of that, as you can see the head right there. And then on this bait, it's actually got wings to cause it to kind of hover, but also allow it to get that rocking and swaying motion, hence why it's called the sway minnow. But just a really cool design. I've caught a lot of fish on this one as well. And then rod and reel setup is really important too. I can't stress that enough. Anywhere, I typically throw anywhere from a 6'8" medium to a 7'1" medium. I like the Ducket rods. This one's a Pro Series. I've also got the Micro Magic rod up there. I like a mid-range spinning reel gear ratio. Somewhere in that mid-6s gear ratio is what I like. You know, this one's a 6'2" to 1. I got a Cast King that's a 6'2" to 1. Just a really good all-around gear ratio on your spinning reels. I like to use either 10 or 15 pound braid, or actually I use a little bit of mono on the base of the reel and go to 10 to 15 pound braid, and then I tie a 8 to 10 pound fluorocarbon leader. That's basically the size of the rod that I'm using. That's how long I put my leader. But that fluorocarbon to braid just adds a lot of sensitivity, adds a little bit more finessey approach. Can't see the line as well, and I really think it makes a difference. And something that's important whenever you're fishing this minnow, you want to keep that drag system loose. As you can see, most of the time I just barely lean into these fish. I don't set the hook. That was a big mistake I made when I first started. I would break my line all the time because I'm just out here setting the hook like I'm punching you know, a 65 pound braid or something. You don't have to do that. Just lean into it, because most of the time these fish are going to hit the minnow as it's moving, and it just sets the hook on itself. It's kind of like throwing a crankbait, you know, you don't have to set the hook. But guys, if you take this information into account on your next time fishing with forward facing sonar, I really think it's going to help you be more efficient on the water and catch more fish. So guys, I know a lot of you have tuned in for the rod giveaway. So in order for you to win the rod, you've got to first like this video, be subscribed to the channel, comment down below what your personal best is, and also say done when you've completed all these steps. I will be letting the winner know down below in the comments here in a couple weeks. I'll comment back to your comment and get you set up, you know, get all your shipping info, what rod you want and all that, guys. So I want to say thank you again for 5,000 subscribers. That means a lot to me. All the support that you guys have shown me here in the last year or two, it really means a lot to me, and I appreciate it a lot. So guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. Oh, and if you want any of these jig heads or any of these minnow style baits, I've got everything linked down in the description below to Tackle Warehouse. You can go check it out. Get your hands on some of those and catch some fish like I've been doing. So guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.